Hey guys, so new hair, new me. Let's get started. Today we have day 9 of the reveals for Raging Echoes in Leagues 5. Now, this is a big one, okay? So normally I just go off the cuff and I just see what's presented, like the reveal, and I give my first thoughts, and that's like how we do these videos typically. But this reveal is so expansive that I've actually taken notes on everything, so please forgive me if you see a bunch of cuts in this video because I want to really break down all of this as much as I can and just go through all the points. And once again, this will be containing spoilers, so if you don't want to be spoiled for the upcoming leagues reveals, then click off the video now. Otherwise, we're going to get into it. And I just want to preface that I am a Grandmaster in game, so this is a breakdown from my perspective, being able to do like high-level PVM and stuff, and I'll hopefully be able to bridge that gap for you if this is something that is like your first time trying a piece of content in game. Last leagues, I was a bit weaker in my PVM. It was my first time trying Nightmare. I tried it in leagues. Leagues really lowers the barrier of entry for all of these complex PVM encounters, really makes them accessible. It's a really good time to try out these things if you haven't tried them, like Inferno, like Coliseum, like Nightmare, just anything that you're too afraid of raiding, like that sort of thing. This is a really safe, good opportunity to try out these things, and I hope you guys will have as great of a time as I will. But yeah, without further ado, let's get into the video. And if you like this type of stuff, don't be cringe, subscribe, enjoy, leave a like, comment, all that good stuff. All right, so today we have combat masteries. First, I'm going to basically just read off all of this as it goes. If you want to skip this part, I will put chapters in the video description, and then if you hover over the video, you'll be able to see when I actually start to talk about these things or break them down after the fact. So if you already know what's going on, feel free to skip ahead. Let's go. So, combat masteries. Spend combat mastery points to unlock powerful style-focused abilities. Earn combat mastery points by completing assigned tasks. Earn up to 10 of them. Each ability requires the previous tier of the style to be unlocked. You unlock a passive effect for each tier you reach the first time. These passive buffs apply to all styles. So you could think of this as basically a skill tree. And this graph is basically like a skill tree flipped horizontally instead of vertically. So you would progress up this way, and this way. And you cannot double dip. You cannot change your masteries once you lock into them either. This is set for you, which is the interesting part about leagues, is that your decision makings are final and affect the rest of your account for that particular playing session. And we have passives attached to each of these. There are also ways to unlock combat masteries that I'm currently blocking right here. So let me just move the webcam up for you. So right under the webcam, you'll see that it says unlock combat mastery points by completing the following tasks: defeating a giant, defeating 10 monsters within a combat level of 100 plus, defeating Scarius by yourself, defeat monster with a Slayer requirement of 55, Jad, reaching a combat level of 100, defeat 1, 2, and 3 unique echo bosses. And there is actually a bottom one that is cut off for some reason, but it is to defeat Zuck. So you have to complete the Inferno for your last combat point. And with these points, you could spend them into this skill tree. There are 6 tiers. So out of 10, you cannot max out 2 combat styles, but you can go for any particular combat style. You can go all the way up to tier 6. And then you would have 4 points to spend on a different tier, or you will have 2 tier 5s in combat styles with none in another, or you could split them all up to be like 4, 3, 3, that sort of thing. Okay, so let's get into the passives first before we get into the specifics. Let me move this up again. The passives here are at the bottom. Okay, and now we have things like Zuck at the bottom. So the passives, tier 1. You get a 95% chance to save weapon charges, ammunition, and runes used for spells. This is very easy when you take into account that one of the tasks is to defeat a giant right here. So the passive tier 2 is that healing from all sources is increased by 20%. So things like a shark will, instead of healing 20, heal you for a 24. Passive tier 3, accuracy with all styles is increased by 100%. No explanation needed. Passive tier 4, that was passive tier 3. Passive tier 4 is damage taken is reduced by 15%, great for things like Inferno and Coliseum and general raiding, anything that you can't pray against. Passive tier 5, prayer point gain from all sources is increased by 25%. So with tier 1 with the passive from tier 2, as well as the passive from tier 5, there is less demand for your supplies, for gathering supplies, which is really good because it means that you'll have to spend less time gathering supplies. Your supplies will go further in each encounter. This is also a very small minor L for Banker's Note because the supplies you have will last you longer in one inventory than they would otherwise. The passive for tier 6. Attacks with all styles now have 60% prayer penetration. I couldn't think of many monsters. I'm sure maybe there's like one or two I'm not thinking of. So this will be good for a small portion of necks, the Wardens at Tombs of a Musket, and Demonic Gorillas. I'm having trouble thinking of better ones, but this is not that impactful, I think. So I just have like a hypothesis that the reason why this is in here as a passive for tier 6 is because the Echo bosses will probably be using Protection Prayers. And that would make sense as to why you have this being a tier 6. Okay, so let's get into the skill tree. For melee, we have at tier 1, melee hits have a 25% chance to roll damage twice and take the highest result. This feels like a Fang, but it's not, because it's not a 25% chance to roll twice against accuracy. It's a 25% chance to roll another damage point and then take the highest results. So if I don't know if this means that you have to pass accuracy for this to even have the potential to proc, but if it does, then that would mean if I hit like a 9 and then I activate this tier 1 passively, and then I would have hit an 11, it's calculated on the back end, then my actual real hit becomes an 11. If it's not calculated at all, if you hit a 0 on accuracy, well then the relic's just like the tier 1 mastery rather is just like a small neat perk, but it could be potentially really cool. This will be extra impactful for the scythe because the scythe has 3 rolls for damage. It has 3 hit splats, as well as any multi-hitting weapons such as Sulfur Blades and the Glacial Tumulties, as well as the Blood Moon set, especially with the Blood Moon set effect. So, but yeah, that's like a breakdown. First I'll just like read these things. Melee hits have a 10% chance to generate an echo hit. Additional melee hit, 50% max hit respects accuracy, PVM only. So it's basically like you get an extra hit, and it maxes up to 50% of your normal attack. For tier 3, melee attack rate is set to 80% rounded down. This means things like your sight 5 tick become 4 tick. Also the soul spear becomes 4 tick from being a 5 tick. Things like the whip becomes a 3 tick. Basically everything goes 1 tick down at the tier 3 relic. This could be really useful if you plan on maxing out one combat style and you have like 4 points left over, and then you could definitely buff one of the other styles such as ranging to get a 1 tick blowpipe, even though you don't have the tier 5 mastery. So for tier 4, you have melee hits that have 5% chance to heal 40% of the damage dealt. This is basically a innate built Blood Fury on anything you do, so you don't have to go and get the blood shards yourself if you're going for melee and you're picking Morytania. This is huge. This is also huge for anyone else. This is once again an L for Banker's Note. Total recall stays winning. So because you won't have to heal. You won't have to heal traditional food. You could just like DPS things down and get your healing that way. Tier 5. Melee attack rate is set to 50% round down above tier 5 tick, rounded up below 4 tick. So this is the same thing as the combat relic in the previous leagues, where your sights will become 2 tick, your spears will become 2 tick, your fang will become 2 tick, your Elder Maul will become 3 tick. I think it's 6. Not too sure, something like that. I think Elder Maul is 6 tick, or maybe God Swords are 6 tick. One of those. It halves. It basically halves. It's really good. But yeah, I can't think of any 3 tick weapons besides like the Ham Joint and Swift Blade. It's very good. This is very good. Obviously, 2 tick Scythe Flick, come on. We're tier 6. This is the big one. Your chance to generate a melee echo, that is melee echo referring to the tier 2 mastery, increases to 20%, so it's double the chance, and your echoes themselves can generate additional echoes up to 8 times in a row. Now, if these are marginal returns, meaning like if I have echo 1 being 50% of my max hit and then it becomes 25%, is much worse than if it's every echo hit is 50% of my normal max. That could be potentially incredibly ridiculous, and all hit splats have a chance of proccing an echo hit. That means the double hitting things like the Sulfur Blades and Glacial Tumulties, as well as the Scythe that hits 3 times, all each uniquely have a chance to proc an echo hit. So with the Scythe, you are effectively proccing an echo hit every 2 attacks on average. Actually a little bit less than every 2 attacks, but you can think of it as every 2 attacks you are proccing at least 1 echo hit. And that happens every 4 ticks because you will be attacking at a 2 tick rate with the tier 5 passive. Moving on to the range portion. For tier 1, we have damage rolls beneath 30% of max hit with range are increased to 30%. This basically puts a Fang minimum, or rather a Void Waker minimum on all of your range hits. If you pass accuracy, and let's say your max hit is a 10, you will never hit a 1 or a 2. You will always hit a 3+. So huge DPS increase, especially early on tier 1. Way higher than I would say the tier 1 passive for melee in the early game. For tier 2, each subsequent range attack has its max hit increase by an additional 5%, which resets after 20%. So keep on shooting, and then you will get 20%, and then it'll reset to 0. The way you could think about this is every attack stacks 5%, meaning you start at 0, then you go 5, 10, 15, 20, and then you start at 0 again. So you have 5 hits going on there, and we can quickly calculate what % damage you would expect to get if you passed accuracy for every single hit. That is going to be like 105 plus 110 plus 115 plus 120 plus 100. So over 5 hits, if you hit your max, you would be hitting 550. If your base damage was 100, and then we divide this by 5, and we get 110, which is 10%. So mathematically, you could just trust me on this or do it yourself. Mathematically, this comes out to be effectively a 10% DPS increase just by taking this relic. And this is on top, it's not exactly 10% because your initial damage baseline is up by 30% thanks to the tier 1 relic. It is going to be up by 30%. And then this thing would give you a up to 10% DPS. The math is kind of finicky with the increase to 30% here, but you're basically just getting a DPS increase for tier 2. For tier 3, range attack rate set to 80% rounding down. It is just like the melee one. This means your crossbow becomes a 4 tick, your bowfa becomes a 3 tick, your blowpipe, most importantly, if you have a blowpipe, a toxic blowpipe or a Drygore blowpipe from the Echo Boss Calphite Queen, you will be attacking at 1 tick for the blowpipe at tier 3, so you don't have to max it out. It is very viable to say you're going to go to tier 6 in either melee or mage, and then go for tier 3 on range just for the blowpipe, increased attack speed. It is probably something we'll see. It's probably something I'll even do. For tier 4, every 5th range hit heals 5 hit points. This is lifesteal. This is huge for a blowpipe, but you're forced to stand still because you'll be attacking every 1 tick. But every 5 ticks, so every scythe swing, every fang hit in game time, you would be healing 5 hit points. Kinda cool. Otherwise, it would be whatever it is you're using every 5 range hits to heal 5 hit points. But you could definitely use this as like a, hey, I'm just going to heal up now. And maybe you even do this on Guardians in Chambers of Xeric, and you just like keep blowpiping the Guardians and healing up to 5 HP every time. This is, once again, an L for Banker's Note. For tier 5, for range, we have ranged attack rate set to 50% rounded down above 5 ticks will be rounded up below 4 ticks. So they'll be halved. Just like with tier 5, meaning your twisted bows are going to be 2 tick, your crossbows are going to be 2 tick as well. And then for tier 6 for range, never miss with range, 100% accuracy. This means anything that doesn't give you damage bonus for range is worthless on a range build. You will not need it ever. You can go full Torva if you don't have Missouri. Effectively, I think only Missouri gives you range bonus damage. Maybe I'm talking out of my ass for that one. It feels like that's the case, in which case you don't need Armadillo. You don't need anything besides like whatever else you're using, because you won't be increasing damage. You'll always hit every single time with tier 6. The implications for this and Twisted Bow are just like galactic, and I'll go over that as well when we get to it. For the third combat style for Mage, when you roll above 90% of your max hit with magic, damage is increased by 50%. So when you roll above 90% of your max hit with magic, damage is increased by 50%. So 9 out of 10 times you will be hitting 50% more. This will be huge with things like elemental weaknesses, especially early game for Mage, because your max hit is lower, so you have a higher chance when you're using like up to level 8 magic, you have a 1 in 8 chance instead of a 1 in 10 chance because your max hit is 8. Something like that. I feel like this, I'm not quite sure on the math on that, I just feel like this is better earlier. For tier 2 in magic, your magic max hit is increased by 5% per tick in between your attacks. So if you are big chillin' with your magic attack, you are increasing the max hit. So if I'm using like a trident and it's 4 tick, then I have a 20% increase. I think this is what it means. I feel like this is kind of a nerf for later on, for when you have things like a 2-tick shadow, because you'll only have 1 tick in between your attacks. Actually, in between your trident attacks, you would have 3 ticks because you attack every 4th tick. So that would be a 15% damage increase before you get any attack speed buffs. The thing is, though, that at tier 3, the very next tier, you get an attack rate buff. Magic attack rate set to 80% rounded down, which means that your trident or warp scepter or whatever you have will start to hit every 3 ticks, giving you only 2 ticks in between. So that would be a 10% increase instead of a 15. This goes really hard though with elemental spell autocasting, because autocasting is on the normal spellbook is every 5 ticks for a spell, so you have a lot of downtime. This makes your elemental spells hit harder but also faster, but not too fast to where you don't gain the benefit of the tier 2 passive. For tier 4, when you roll above 90% of your max hit with magic, you'll heal 10% of the damage dealt, which feels a bit bad, except that this will probably happen relatively often. And if you hit like a 30, you're healing like a 3. If you're using a shadow and you're hitting like a 90, then you are healing 9. So it could be cool, but I feel like this isn't as strong as the other ones. For tier 5, for melee, you have the magic attack rate set to 50% rounded down above 5 tick, rounded up below 4 tick. This means 2 tick shadows. And it also is a huge L for Morytania if you plan on going the magic route, which is me. I really wanted to try an account build, unironically, with the Kandarin Echo boss and the Harmonized Nightmare staff. However, everything that you use that is 5 tick for Mage would be 2 tick with the tier 5 passive, so it effectively clears out Morytania if you want to go into a magic focused build. I probably would never suggest going Morytania now that you're able to get to this tier 5 if you're going to go hard on magic in particular. For tier 6, max hit with magic is increased by 1% for every 100% remaining on the target up to 10%. What that means is when you're fighting something like Warden and it has 2000 HP, you have a 10% increased max hit on Warden. If it goes to 900 HP, then you have a 9% max hit on Warden. And then the second part of this, on a successful magic hit, if your target has less hit points than your max hit, you max hit. And this is a extremely nerfed version of Executioner's Axe from last leagues, where you just one tap D in Rage Phase. This feels like the weakest of all the 3. And now I'm just going to get into the breakdown of things, so I'll be referring to the notes I took and stuff like that and hopping back and forth. So to me, this feels like it's one of the weakest of the 3 combat styles, specifically because of the second part of this. On a successful magic hit, if your target has less hit points than your max hit, you max hit. So if we imagine that your max hit is taken into account with the tier 1 passive from Mage, then let's say you are hitting like 90s or high 80s with max Mage Shadow as a baseline, then what are you expecting to hit? Like 120? Maybe with the tier 2 passive, maybe you're hitting up to 150, in which case your target would have to be under 150 HP. Actually, now that I think about it, this is ultra gross for anything that isn't a boss. Holy, like, can you imagine? So You remember, if you guys can recall, if you played last league, you were able to Darok bomb with a relic called Berserker, where you hit your max hit if an NPC had its HP to full. This thing though is basically that for Mage for any Slayer mob. I think like what Abyssal Demons have like under 150 HP or something, so you're like gonna just one tap them, I guess. That's pretty neat. You'll literally just like be one-shotting everything with your shadow if you're doing like any non-raid or non-boss specific PVM. Man, the implications of this actually can go pretty hard. I'm thinking like if you can buff, if we get a combat relic that increases your damage based on your HP, this is going to go nuts, especially with Barrage. You're actually just going to decimate entire multi-mobs. So this could be a sleeper. It sounds worse than the others, but it could actually be a sleeper. We'll have to see as we get more and more relics. Okay, so let's go into the breakdown of things. Healing, being able to lifesteal with these masteries is massive for Total Recall. As I talked about in my previous video of like, oh my god, such a hard choice. I was going over between Total Recall and Banker's Note because it legitimately is a hard choice. Banker's Note is way more accessible for doing the harder pieces of content in leagues. And it also gives you the benefit of doing the harder content with almost no gear or anything if you're a really good PVMer. However, Total Recall has such high utility, and you don't need to get all these extra supplies that Banker's Note gives you because you will just be an absolute powerhouse with all of this lifesteal. This further solidifies my decision in the previous video to go with Total Recall. I just think it's just an absolute W. However, Banker's Note still has its utility, of course, but like these masteries really help out Total Recall. I exactly was hoping for lifesteal in that previous video to buff Total Recall. It's also worth noting that these mastery choices are permanent. So you're locked in. You are locked in with whatever you decide to go with. Charge and ammunition saving is very huge for things like Blowpipe and the Scythe and the Shadow. You won't have to just like spend a lot of time rune crafting or smithing. You get like 1,000 charges. You actually have enough for the entire leagues. I'm not even capping, because or maybe you need like 2,000 charges. The idea is that when you're saving like 95% of your ammunition, it's basically like you have 10k charges for 500 charges, something like that. It maps to something similar like that. It's really huge. So yeah, that is just massive. That's going to make everything easier, especially with getting things like darts for the blowpipe, because you're shooting every tick. You won't need that many darts, as many as you think, given that it is a one tick weapon in leagues. And I talked about tier 6 potentially being useful for the echo bosses, because it feels like why would they make this whole thing a passive at tier 6 when almost nothing in the game actually uses protection prayers? I feel like it's going to be used specifically for echo bosses. Let's also talk about the combat mastery points. Those are the things over here. They are right under here. So the combat masteries, I want to just mention specifically how easy it will be to get to tier 3. Oh my goodness. You just have to kill a giant, like a hill giant in the Edgeville dungeon or somewhere like that. And then you can go to Tazar to kill the Tazar monsters there. They are all 100 combat plus. You can safe spot them with magic too, and you get a crazy max hit early on. Plus you get these tier 1 passives for each of the combat styles. So depending on what combat style you're going for, well, basically only range and mage, you will be able to kill those extremely quickly. And then you just have to defeat Scurius solo. And Scurius is not a hard boss, especially with these tiers. You could probably do Scurius like base 50s or something, maybe even lower with all of these different combat styles. The hardest part about being able to defeat Scurius solo will be to get 43 prayer so that you could properly pray against him. It feels to me like you should be able to get all the way to the tier 3 passives within like 3 hours of gameplay. That's how fast it feels like it's going to be. But to get beyond that, to get over 3 points, I feel like it's going to be significantly harder, because with things like defeating the Slayer monster at 55 Slayer or higher, I feel like your region is going to define how quickly you can actually complete this. Maybe you would even need a second region. However, we will all have access to Abyssal Demons via the Abyssal Plane through the Fairy Ring. So at the very least, you will be able to defeat an Abyssal Demon, but most likely you'll have something earlier than 85 Slayer to complete your 4th mastery. Defeating Giant in the Fight Caves, Every average PVMer should be able to do this. Even a casual PVMer should be able to do this with the League's relics. Also, for being able to get to tier 3 within like the first 3 hours, I also am taking into account the average player. You should be able to hit tier 3 extremely quickly, so look forward to that. Reaching a combat level of 100 is pretty much inevitable. That's just a playing over time type of thing. It depends how hard you go. Defeating an Echo boss might be difficult, might be not, depending on your region. Things like Soul, for example, is the hardest Echo boss, and that is my first region, so I'm gonna have a lot of fun with that. And then the combat masteries are locked. Actually, there's something to note here, because it's not clear to me if you need all 3 regions. Most of us will need all 3 regions to actually gain all of our combat mastery points. However, the Fremnik region has Dagannoth Kings, and they are all Echo variants. Does that count as 3 separate bosses or 1 boss? I'm not sure. If it does count as 3 separate bosses, you basically get 3 points immediately when killing all the Echo DKs, but I'm not sure if that'll be the case. Same for Grotesque Guardians. Will those count as 2 instead of 1? Who knows? Remains to be seen. And then defeating Zuck is surprisingly easy once you have all the other stuff going for you. Like if you grinded Echo weapons, if you have the masteries as well as all the relics, then the Infernos actually becomes an approachable piece of content for almost everybody. So that is something to look forward to too. However, just getting to tier 6 to max out one of your combat styles, assuming you plan on going for tier 6, getting to tier 3 is extremely easy. Getting to defeat a Slayer monster just takes a little bit of time. Defeating fight caves should be relatively straightforward, and then reaching combat level 100, there you go. That's tier 6. That's pretty simple to me. I feel like it should be very achievable for everyone to get to their preferred tier 6. At the minimum, tier 5 should be like free, ultra free. You don't even have to defeat Jad in the fight caves for that. You literally just have to just prance around the game doing the other 5 tasks instead, without even touching a single Echo boss or the Inferno. But if you do want all 10 combat mastery points, you will have to do all these things. And they are one-time things. You can't just double down on them and defeat like 100 Thazar monsters to get 10 points. You have to do all these things one time individually as if they are league tests. But if it's worth noting though that if you go into melee for this leagues and you spec into tier 6, you will have to keep in mind that you will somehow have to be able to hit Zuck, because Zuck is gated by distance. So you literally won't be able to melee Zuck. That is something you have to keep in mind. In the last leagues, I did this with the ACB. It was pretty terrible as a melee build. These mastery points will make it a lot easier though, if you plan on going for like the tier 3 range, or like even a tier 1 mage will make it a lot easier if you plan on like shadowing Zuck with your magic robes and all that stuff. So remains to be seen. However, do note that if you plan on going melee, that you at some point might want to think about the Inferno and what you're planning on doing during the Zuck fight in particular, if you want to get that last point of combat mastery. Alright, so now I'm going to go into the 3 combat styles and the different notes that I took on them. For melee, at tier 6, the Scythe hits 3 times. That means you'll get an Echo hit per splat. This is confirmed. That's huge. This incredibly buffs Varlamore, specifically tier 3 of the combat mastery system. Melee attack rate set to 80% rounding down. The Blood Moon set effect already has a chance of proccing per swing of the boppers that you get, the dual Maquados. And going from 4 tick to 3 tick is a 25% increased attack speed for the Blood Moon set. However, the Blood Moon set effect also further increases your attack. I think it has like a 75% chance, something like that, of actually increasing your next attack by 1 tick. So you are effectively not going from 4 tick to 3 tick Blood Moon, but you're going from like in between 2 and 3 ticks immediately with the Blood Moon effect as a melee build, which is crazy because you can also generate Echo hits since your dual Maquados are hitting twice. As soon as you get the Moon stuff, it's over. Like your mid game is going to be progressively stronger than all these other ones, in my opinion, and that is particularly good news for someone like me who is picking Varlamore first. And then further, if you don't already have if you don't have like a Scythe or another super powerful melee weapon like a Soul Reaper axe or the Soul Spear or something at tier 5, you will then get 2 tick Blood Moon with a chance for it to lower to a further 1 tick on your next hit. It goes nuts. It'll probably go nuttier than literally and most items you can get. So that's already pretty epic, to say the least. It's also worth noting that the melee masteries also super buff double hitting weapons such as the, well, I guess you could throw out Torag hammers in there too, but I'm thinking specifically Varlamore. You can get Sulfur Blades extremely early. Those are double hitting weapons. You can get Glacial Tumulties extremely early. Those are also double hitting weapons. And then you'll get a huge XP boost with the new Dragon Boss that was released, the Huequado. And then you'll just go nutty. You'll just go absolutely nutty. There won't be a comparison for the melee route outside of Varlamore. It'll just go insane, especially with all the passives and the buffs that you get within the Perilous Moods dungeon for double hitting weapons. And you could check out my video on why Varlamore is the best first pick, for where I talk about all the benefits for specifically the melee combat system as you're going through it. This was also confirmed but not listed here. There is a Echo boss for Varlamore, Soul Herited. Funny enough, but yeah, he's going to be the Echo boss for the region. He's going to drop a spear and a staff, and the spear has a special attack. It's worth noting that to charge the spear special attack, you need at least 7 stacks, so 7 hits with the spear. However, it was confirmed that the echo hits that you gain from these melee passives also contribute to the stacks. This is really good. This is really good. It makes your soul spear like that much more potent earlier on. I thought it was going to be like a dead weapon immediately as soon as you get like a scythe or even a soul reaper axe, like literally anything where you have to do single way combat against like a one-on-one against an NPC. I thought that the soul spear would just drop off and only be used for things like Slayer. However, now it seems like the echo hits will gain stacks as well. So when you go to tier 6, you could potentially do like 1 spear hit or 2 spear hits, and then your echoes will chain and you could immediately do a special attack. The special attack for the soul spear is typeless, by the way, and scales off of your prayer bonus as well. This could be really useful at things like DKs, where I assume I would put like a 99% certainty that you will have to use multiple combat styles for the echo bosses at DKs, which means that the soul spear special attack will be really good in that place. All right, so going down to range. I took some notes on range. For range, at tier 6, you won't need any range accuracy gear. You'll only need damage. This effectively only comes from Missouri. Okay, armor. So I'm just looking at the armor right now. Zerite Vam Braces are, you would need to kill next at Asgarnia, or you would have to get the Sunlight Bracers from the Echo Boss in Varlamore to actually have a damage increase for your range. And then the other stuff for range that's available are just Missouri. For your armor pieces, your headgear, your leg gear, and your chest gear are only for Missouri. Which means that at tier 6 for range, the only benefit you get from range armor will have to be through the desert. So it's a high incentive to unlock the desert if you're going to go for a range build. I would say it's personally almost necessary. However, you'll still do a shit ton of damage even without Missouri, so you won't necessarily need desert, but like you literally will have to wear different armor because your range armor will no longer matter at all ever, because you will never miss with range. So that is something to consider if you want additional damage. Otherwise, your gear switching will just become easier. Like you could camp Torva or Blood Moon or whatever else you have if you are going for the tier 6 mastery for range. The blowpipe's going to go insane. At tier 3, the range attack rate is rounded down, which means everything goes down effectively 1 tick. So normally in the past league, you would need to already have this tier 5 passive thing that halves all of the attack rate of weapons. However, at tier 3, the blowpipe is already so fast that you're going from tier 2 to tier 1. It is going to be going down by half already at tier 3. So that is insane for DPS, especially because you only need 3 mastery points to get there. You can max out a different combat style and have a 1-tick blowpipe. The downside of a 1-tick blowpipe is that anything that requires you to move in the game by force or otherwise or by mistake will impact your DPS, because you have to sacrifice game ticks in order to move, meaning that your blowpipe will not be doing as much damage as it otherwise could have compared to something else that fires at a 2-tick rate or a 3-tick rate, where you can actually have the time to move around. Yeah, 2-tick with the tier 6, 2-tick Twisted Bow goes interstellar against literally anything with a high magic level. Zuck, goodbye. Literally just all the mages in Inferno, goodbye. It's like you're Thanosing it. because you are hitting like so ultra high with the twisted bow against these targets. If you're doing chambers, everything is goodbye as well, because you're not missing a single target. Anything with a high mage level is complete dunzo, including one of the DK bosses as well. I imagine it will have a high magic level. You're hitting like 80s every 2 ticks. 100%. like you are just absolutely annihilating it. The 2-tick twisted bow appeal for never missing with range is such a power boost that it actually is making me consider going for a range build over a magic build if I do a second account. For my first account, I'll be doing a melee build, but now I really want a second account just for tier 6 twisted bow. That's crazy. It's crazy. However, this also means that if you go for a range build, you'll really have to consider the regions to go for. This gives an actual buff to Kandarin for once. Funny enough, an actual buff, because in Kandarin, you get the heavy ballista. It hits really hard. It'll be a 3-tick weapon after the tier 5 mastery, and you will never miss. This goes especially hard at anything that doesn't have a high magic level. Or if you go for a blowpipe, then I guess you don't really care about the ballista anyway. But it's remains to be seen if it's worth it, because if you're doing any content that requires movement, then the heavy ballista might actually just out DPS the blowpipe just out of practicality, not theoretically, because you'll literally have to be moving, and you can do that with a heavy ballista. Oh, it's worth also noting that the tier 6 mastery for range turns the Drygore blowpipe into a bit of a stepping stone. It's kind of a nerf because it has the Fang effect of rolling double accuracy. That is completely negated and worthless because you will never miss with range. Accuracy won't matter, so it'll just become a normal weapon. It won't be anything special. So yeah, it'll still attack at 1 tick, which is like really cool and all that, but you know, it's not always practical to use a 1-tick weapon. So this is a slight nerf to blowpipe, specifically the Drygore blowpipe, and consequently kind of a nerf for the desert long term. However, you could still think of the Drygore blowpipe as a stepping stone for your build. Okay, so tier 1 and tier 3 masteries are especially big for Varlamore people like me, because Varlamore in leagues allows you to buy the Hunter's Crossbow off rip from a shop, and then you could further upgrade it with hunting, with a high enough hunter level, I think, something like that, so that you can transform it into the Sunlight Hunter Crossbow, and it attacks every 3 ticks, which is already fast. However, you will get a damage minimum attached to it with the tier 1 passive. That's already huge. However, by the time you actually get that Hunter Sunlight Crossbow, you will already probably be at least tier 3, in which case you're going from a 3-tick crossbow to a 2-tick crossbow. This is a really good alternative for people that don't have access to a region with a blowpipe. Mainly anyone who's not going Tirranwn or desert now can have a substitute for a powerful range weapon without needing to go all the way to tier 5 or tier 6 in range. Very cool. Oh, and when I said anyone, I mean specifically Varlamore people. I'm sorry. And now we're going to go finish it off with magic. Okay, so magic, the tier 6 mastery feels like the Executioner's Axe, but heavily nerfed when it comes to the longer grinds of PVM or boss encounters. However, as I stated before, it might be a huge sleeper, and it might go ultra hard for smaller mobs like for Slayer, as well as for barraging in Slayer. Could go extremely hard. It remains to be seen though. I also mentioned that the early game will be really good because your max hit is lower, so you'll have a higher chance of activating the tier 1 passive. But that's only for a short amount of time, so it's like, it's not that big of a deal really, unless you just farm elemental weaknesses early or something like that. And I also talked about how tier 5 magic is a nerf for the harm staff. Okay, and those are basically my initial thoughts on the combat masteries. And now I'm going to be just discussing what I'm picking. So most likely I'll go for a Scythe on my account build. I know, wow, how original. Just because like it's so compelling. Tier 6 with the echo attacks as well. 3 hits on the Scythe, 2-tick weapon. It doesn't get any better than that. That's going to be huge. I'm so looking forward to that. However, now I'm conflicted on what my region choices are. Before I was going to go Varlamore and Fremnik, and I was really leaning into desert to help complete the trifecta for the styles because I was hoping that there would be benefit when you're using all these styles. However, you get so much accuracy that it might not be relevant. It looks like that this go around is still going to be a heavy focus on one combat style per account build, because you can only max out tier 6 on one of the styles. However, you could go for a hybrid route where you go tier 5 in 2 different combat styles, and now you have 2 styles that have 2 tick weapons. Could be really massive. That being said, I'm still undecided now between Morytania and the desert. However, I was wanting to make a second account build with Tirranwn, funny enough. I wanted to get the elemental echo weapon from Tirranwn and pair it with the harmonized nightmare staff from Morytania. But with the tier 5 passive for magic, it's useless. The harm staff is literally useless for any type of magic stuff. So that frees up that region, or frees up another region for a magic build if it turns out that it's viable to go into an elemental build. And it also means that Morytania is on the table for me personally to do the melee route with. So Varlamore, Fremnik, Morytania are all on the table, and this might influence my region order because I might want the Black Mask before I access Fremnik. I'm not sure though. I'm not completely sold yet on Morytania, because going for both Varlamore and Morytania is a huge nerf to the amulet that you get from Fremnik. It basically makes it not as impactful for melee users. So I might even not go Fremnik anymore and choose to go Tirranwn instead for the crystal percent bonus. That could be really neat. I'm like a bit torn. Before I thought I was going to go for 3 regions. Now I'm going for 3. Future relics will release as well. Maybe that'll influence our decisions from what we already know today. So we'll have to see. Yeah. If there's no further information on elemental weaknesses or elemental mage builds or stuff like that, then Tirranwn is a massive L. And the second account build that I'll go for will definitely be 2-tick twisted bow, never miss guarantee. That is gonna go crazy. That actually might make chambers tolerable. but no, on the real, like that's gonna go insane. That is definitely going to be my second build, unless we have like crazy news regarding elemental weaknesses. I am making this prediction that there will be a way to apply a elemental weakness status effect to whatever you're fighting for magic, and it will be a combat relic or something like that. That is my bold prediction, and if so, I might have to consider a magic build anyway. But yeah, this is a crazy reveal. This is like hugely extensive. I did tell you guys this would be a huge video. Now I have to go edit it. But yeah, by the time you see this, it will have already been edited, and then I will be really curious to know just what you guys think of this. Yeah, there's a lot to go over. Just what are your first impressions, or does this make you more hype or not? If you aren't planning on playing leagues, or know people that aren't planning on playing leagues, just get the word out. This is crazy stuff right here. There's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot to think about too, and it's like tailored to whatever playstyle you prefer, whatever regions you want to get into. But yeah, that's pretty much for me. If you like this type of stuff, then if you want to see more leagues coverage, I'll be covering leagues every day until release, and then probably streaming it as well. It's unfortunate that League does release on Thanksgiving, which is a US holiday, so I might not be able to do much there or even release a progress video on that day, but it'd be like that. Otherwise, I'll probably be streaming leagues extremely heavily and trying to update you guys with like progress vids here on YouTube with all that stuff. But yeah, once again, thank you guys for watching all that stuff. This is dope. I'm really enjoying covering this. I'll probably be releasing more non-leagues videos as well, like the Monkey Room for TOA and other Pitfall videos that I have, all that stuff. If you want to familiarize yourself with PVM before league starts, feel free to check out my channel for the other stuff that I have already put out. And also, as always, feel free to leave any suggestions for what you'd like to see me make in terms of like video ideas or whatever else in the comments below. I'll be reading all of them, replying, all that stuff. But so yeah, enough rambling. I've rambled for a long time. This is crazy hype. Really curious to see what else we're going to get. But this is what we know right now from today's Combat Mastery reveal. See you later.